to Yoselin, who really was the one that made sure that this event came all together. She gathered all of us panelists, myself as moderator, and really is the reason why this event is happening. And of course, huge shout out to the entire Tequeria team who puts on amazing events such as this. So again, like she said, my name is Amber Gonzales-Vargas. I am the daughter of Marco Gonzalez and Sylvia Vargas. Whenever I open any sort of conversation that I'm moderating, I always mention their name, and this virtual event will be no different because I am here because of them. And they have been such a huge influence in my life and into my development and who I am today that I always like to make sure that I say their name in my presentations. I'm also a Cal grad, so go Bears. Feel free to chat that if you would like. If you're a Bear, type that in. So let's start interacting in the chat group. I'm also a proud Peruana. My family, both of my parents come from Peru. They came in the early 90s. I am already seeing Go Peru coming out in the chat. Very happy to see that as well. And a couple of just quick notes about me for fun. I am trying to get to visit 30 countries by the time I'm 30. That's starting to get a little challenging currently with the situation that we have going on, but I have hope I will make it. And I hope to eventually write a New York Times bestseller. As Yoselin also mentioned, I am the Senior Program Manager at the Latino Community Foundation. I have been working at the foundation for about 4 years now. So that's 4 years in philanthropy. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I never thought that I would end up there, and which might be the case for many of you with your current careers. I was just someone who was trying to figure out how I was going to be able to support and impact the community best. And I ended up coming across the Latino Community Foundation about a year after I graduated from college. And I was like, this is it. This is the place that I need to be at right here and right now. And what inspired that was actually a Black Lives Matter movement that happened while I was at UC Berkeley, which really challenged me to think about my own privilege and what I wanted to do to give back to this, to my community here in the US. So now I can say that we are so excited again to have you for this candid conversation on the corporate world. And yes, we're going to go into the good and the bad and the sometimes ugly aspects of this. And we're really lucky to have such amazing panelists joining us here today that are willing to go and dive deep into these conversations. So please make sure that you all are thinking about your questions as you hear them talking, and that you're also engaging with us, of course, in the Q&A boxes and also in the chat. We want to make sure that we're answering all of the questions that you're really hungry to know about. But before we start into this conversation, I do want to recognize that this event was actually supposed to take place in person. And that, like many of the events and our daily sort of going on nowadays, we actually have everything going virtual now. And we're meeting here via Zoom because we are currently living in these unprecedented times. We've been sheltering in place, most of us, for about a month now. And I do want to recognize that because I think it is important that we also know that these are, it's our new normal right now, and we're all going through it. So I just want to send love and power to all of you. I know that for some folks, this has actually been a big struggle. I've had a lot of different folks that have kind of gone through roller coaster of emotions and concerns during this time. So I do just want to call that out, and just, if nobody has told you today, I love you and I hope the best for you, and that I hope that you're safe during this time period. I read this earlier today, and I think it kind of rang true for me, but it says, it's easier being in each other's presence or in each other's absence than in the constant presence of each other's absence. So I'm sharing that because that's kind of how I've been feeling on these Zoom meetings. I'm going to ask our panelists to share a little bit also about kind of their experience right now as we've been sheltering in place. But I'm sharing that because for me, it has been up and down. I'm so excited to be with you all here today because I'm learning to embrace connecting with folks virtually, and for me, it's actually been great. I just came off of a call for my tia Mari's 68th birthday party, and she's out in Peru, and we had her sons calling in from Brazil, and we never would have done that if we didn't have this. So now, enough about me. And without further ado, I want to make sure that you all have the chance to hear from our amazing panelists. We're going to go in order, in alphabetical order from first name, and they're going to share their name, their current role in company, maybe something fun about themselves, and also how they've been dealing and kind of working through shelter in place. So to start us off, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Aliya.
Thank you, Amber. Hello, everyone. My name is Aliya Janjua, and I am a client support director at SS&C Advent Software. It's a financial software company in San Francisco, and I'll be celebrating my 20th anniversary in October, God willing.
Wow.
How am I coping with this shelter in place? Well, I'm also a mom. I have 3 children. My oldest is a college freshman, and he went away to school. He went to New York. That was a really hard time for me. Letting go of your child, especially cross country, is hard to do. But he's back now, and I don't know for how long. So, hey, things change. I'm sure he's not happy about it. And then I also have a high school sophomore, and I have a 6th grader. And a fun fact about me, Amber, like you, I love to travel. And ever since this shelter in place has been put in, I'm getting more of an urge to go somewhere. And I'm coming up with ways of what is my next travel destination. I've been to around 18 countries. The last one was Saudi Arabia in December. And before that, I went to Cambodia. So Machu Picchu is definitely on my list, Amber, and I want to go to Latin America. I'd love to go to Pakistan and get to visit all these places, because we really grow as people when we visit other cultures. And I'm looking forward to being on the panel today and sharing my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Aliya. Up next, we have Jorge Blanco. Jorge?
Thank you, Amber. Yes, I'm saying my name is Jorge Blanco. I work at Yelp. I'm currently a senior software engineer there. Hopefully most of you know about Yelp, but we work with user reviews, and our mission is to connect users with great local businesses, which is a particularly tough thing right now, as we are all in this shelter-in-place situation. But it's a mission that we are still strongly attached to, and it's definitely given us the opportunity to figure out new ways to connect people through this kind of mediums virtually, and allowing people to do the best that they can during these trying times. But yeah, I was happy to hear Amber was coming off of a birthday party, because today is my dad's birthday. So I actually was also having a virtual birthday party just before this. It was really cool to see people there, and I've definitely seen a lot of other connections from around the world that have reached out virtually and connected better in this time. So definitely some silver lining there. But yeah, just a little bit about me. I've also been very fortunate to travel the world a bit. I did my undergrad in Japan. I had a fun time in Europe doing a master's, a couple of years there. Definitely built a lot of connections there, and I couldn't agree more that traveling and seeing other cultures is definitely eye-opening and bring us all closer together. I'm a firm believer that we're all the same. Like once you get around the politics and different cultures, like as people, we're all the same, and we all have the same struggle and the same fears and the same desires. So that's definitely something that's brought me closer, and seeing people from different perspectives has been very helpful. And I'm super excited to participate and get right into the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Jorge. Gracias. Up next, we have Luis. Luis, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Liang. I am an account executive focusing on social impact at Twilio, which is a communications platform. Mostly my work, I work with nonprofits, social enterprises, helping them with their projects. Think about me as a sales and also a consultant on this role. And something about me, well, half Chinese, half Mexican, I would say that. I was born in Mexico. I'm also a DACA beneficiary. I also went to Berkeley, go Bears. And what I'm doing during this pandemic, I was really thankful, or I'm grateful that I joined a coaching group called Atlas. It's a nonprofit, and they do a lot of coaching. So I joined 2 months before everything happened. So they offer, they extended a lot of the coaching sessions. So that I've been getting some coaching and meditation on Mondays and Thursdays. So that has been really helpful. And working on myself and getting to know more about who I am. So this is like a good timing, I guess.
I love that. Good for you. Thank you, Luis.
Yeah.
Up next, we have Shannique.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Shannique Gibson. I am a consulting senior analyst at Accenture, which is, if you don't know what Accenture is a consulting firm. We work with all the Fortune 100 and up companies, and we help them with all different types of businesses. Right now, the project that I'm working on is helping. They're like a conglomerate that just bought another company. I can't say the name. And I'm helping with order management to help hospitals be able to get the devices they need to sanitize their masks, their medical devices, stuff like that to fight COVID, as well as, you know, the influx they usually get of patients that need help and that are sick. I've been with them for about since August of 2019. What have I been up to during this COVID? I've been doing a lot of self-care, a lot of reflection. I've been doing organizing, which I stopped a little bit because just got too busy, as well as a little weak, but just organizing, reading. I'm very creative, so I like to draw, I like to sing, I like to act, I love to dance. Doesn't matter what type of music. I just feel like there's only two genres when it comes to food and music and movies. It's good or bad. I love to travel. I can't even tell you how many countries I've been to, but I would estimate maybe 25.
Wow.
That I've traveled to. I'm definitely a spa enthusiast, so I love spas, and definitely a foodie. And I think I think I answered all the questions. Did I not? Okay.
You got it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannique. A woman after my own heart, 25 countries. So jealous. I'm almost there. I'm at 19, so I'll get there hopefully soon. Up next, but certainly not least, we have Teresa. Teresa, please go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Teresa Hall. I am a lead solution engineer at Salesforce. Fun fact, I actually came from the nonprofit side of things before coming over to Salesforce. So I worked with nonprofits like Kiva and Full Circle Fund, if you're from the Bay Area and know those names. So as far as my role as a solution engineer, you can think of me as sort of a liaison between the customer and the sales team. So I'm a technical expert in all things Salesforce. I help our sales teams figure out what they're going to sell, and I help our customers understand what they're saying. So I'm sort of a translator, technical translator. As far as COVID, I've been doing a lot of time pretending that I'm in other places, like my background here in France. I'm also planning my next trips. I don't know if I've been to 25 countries, but I'm trying to get there as well. I'm trying to figure out where my next thing will be. Another cool thing that I've been able to do kind of through work, and also just because I came from the nonprofit world before, and there's been a lot more virtual consulting opportunities for volunteering, which is great. So one thing, just a shout out for all people working at nonprofits, think about companies like Salesforce. I'm sure there's other volunteering opportunities with other companies here as well. So I'm excited to be here. Nice to meet you all.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Teresa. I don't want to speak on behalf of the entire nonprofit world, but I can share that when folks from different companies reach out to us, it's huge and we greatly appreciate it. We have as a foundation been receiving, luckily, a lot of support during this time period. So thank you for all the work that you're doing on the site as well. Really appreciate it. So everyone, that's all of our panelists. Before we jump into our questions, I do want to share, like, a lot of you are already doing it. Don't forget to go ahead and share your LinkedIn, share who you are. Yes, you're connecting with all of us here that are on this panel, but you're also connecting with each other. And so don't forget to just drop in your LinkedIn. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay if it's not how you want it to be just yet. Go ahead, add your friends, share it. It's worth it, trust. At the very least, I promise I will add you. So go ahead and just share in the chat group. And don't forget to use the Q&A box so that we can start receiving some of your questions. All right? All right, so now, who's ready for some candid conversation? So to just kind of jump right into it, you know, when we were prepping for this call, Shannique was actually the one that say, listen, we have to make sure that everybody on this call understands that it's not about just unicorns and roses, right? When we get into the corporate world, yes, there's some really great benefits that we can probably all think of right now, but there's also some things that can be really challenging. So to that end, I'd like to ask the panel, what is the most challenging thing that you have experienced working in the corporate world? Like, who or what made it challenging, and how were you able to deal with it? So to that end, I'll kick it off with Teresa. Teresa, you want to go ahead and kick us off with that question?
Yeah, sure. So there's like you said, there's a lot of good things. There's also a lot of things that aren't unicorns and roses when it comes to working in tech. One thing that I have faced after making the transition from nonprofit into for-profit and tech, and being the only woman on my team, being the only woman in the sales org that I was working with, is basically having to prove myself or explain myself and say, hey, I'm the technical resource. I'm the person that you want to be looking to. It's not Rick, it's not Bob, it's me. And when they're looking at me, it's because they don't know the answer. I shouldn't have to explain myself. Nobody else is. And so it's been interesting navigating that in a conference room full of men. And I don't think I have it down yet, but after having been at this for 2.5 years, which is really not that long, I think I've kind of figured out the nice finesse of a way to politely tell people, I'm not going to explain myself. I'm not going to be your note taker or your secretary. And I'm actually the one that's going to be leading the conversation. So it's something that happens. I deal with it every day with new customers, with old customers, but it just kind of comes with it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Wow. You know, Aliya, I saw you nodding kind of profusely. You want to go ahead next? Is it the same for you? Has that been the most challenging part about working in the corporate world for you, or is it something else?
No, Teresa's spot on. And for me personally, I come from a first generation Pakistani Muslim background. And I think in the corporate world, it's especially in the tech industry, there's definitely this tribal culture where you've got your cliques and you want to be a part of the clique, right? You want to be a part of the tribe. So for me, navigating that has been difficult. And it took me a while to develop that confidence and get comfortable in my own skin. And what I've noticed with women, I think this is the biggest challenge they face, is this issue with confidence and not believing in themselves. So for my own personal background, I come from a non-tech background as well. Jorge, I studied Japanese in college. That was my major. So I was an IR and Japanese major, and I'm an Aggie, not Bear, Aggie.
I'll go Aggies too.
Go Aggies, right? So when I graduated from college, this was the dot-com boom, and all the jobs were in startups. And so for me, tech was completely out of the picture. I never really saw myself as tech, but somehow I landed in this role. And over time, like, you know, the way you get noticed is when you do good work, right? Yes, there's the aspect of being likable. I think for women especially, likability is a huge factor in your progress in your career. You can't be too assertive and you can't be too timid either. There's a balance, and you have to figure that out in the culture that you're in terms of how to weave those relationships. I think the corporate place is very much interpersonal relationships and, you know, the bonds that you develop. So for me, I got tapped to be a leader, and I didn't see myself as a leader. I never thought that I was a leader. I always considered myself as a follower, and I come from a background where it's disrespectful to speak up and to raise your voice. And I come from an all-girl background, so I never really watched sports. I never really understood football. My dad watches it, but, you know, I was not a big football person. So when you go into a meeting room and there's conversations taking place about football or golf meetings, et cetera, you have to figure out a way in how to weave yourself and insert yourself in those places and be a part of it. And so for me, that took a lot of time to figure out. It took a lot of time for me to develop my confidence. I do have a story that I want to share, and I think this will be as candid as we can get in terms of confidence and being able to use your voice. So this is an area that I worked on a lot, but I agree with Teresa. I think women have a bigger challenge in terms of proving themselves in the tech industry. And if you're a woman of color, it's even harder. And then if you are a woman who is a practicing Muslim like myself, that's even harder. So there's challenges that you have to navigate, but you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself, and you have to be comfortable in your own skin.
Awesome, thank you. And we're really lucky that you became comfortable in your own skin, Aliya, because you've launched your own podcast. You're running the ERG at your company, I think also. Is that correct?
Yes. So I run our women's group at my company. I'm involved as a mentor with tech women. And that's one of the reasons why I've visited some of these countries. And I've worked with a lot of women around the world in the STEM field, people who are in science, technology, all kinds of backgrounds. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, and it's still a journey. You don't really reach the end of your journey until you die, right? So I'm still on that journey.
That's right. Thank you so much. And for those of you that want to check it out, Aliya also did have a podcast, Confessions of Successful Asian Women. So she's not recording right now, but she did have that podcast. So we're really lucky that you did find your voice in that way, Aliya. Awesome. I'm going to pivot down just from my focal. Right next to you is actually Jorge. Jorge, you want to go next and answer the question?
Yeah, I think that the problem with confidence is widespread. Like I think that everybody who joins tech has had that problem with confidence and being able to assert yourself. And kind of jumping a little bit ahead, I think that one of the parts is basically fitting in and being able to kind of like survive the culture, especially if you don't like necessarily fit in, right? That's the part that initially is very challenging, but then once you do get to fit in, once you get comfortable in your own skin and are able to kind of like somehow survive that environment, I think a lot of us want to also grow and want to excel and want to shine. Yeah. And then at that point, it gets even more challenging when you're trying to convince people that you are, that you know your stuff, that you have good ideas, and there's a lot that you have to do there. For me, that's been one of the toughest things, where coming in, had an idea, and then try to say something, and then it doesn't get heard. It's not like particularly taken up. Well, even though I think it's a great idea, but then little by little, I have been learning how to bring these topics up, how to push for them, how to build relationships, so that I'm not evaluated based on only on the merit of my idea, but people know me and know where I come from and know how my work is, and are able to take a leap of faith and kind of like support me, even if they're not fully bought in yet, but they know how I work and all that. So building those relationships, building that trust, building that has been a significant factor for me to be able to grow in my role and to get more opportunities and to be able to do more of what I want to do. So I definitely think that there's some magic to that you have to kind of figure out how you are building that trust with other folks and how you're speaking your voice and in the same way speaking their language. So that's something that it takes time. It's a skill, but something that's very much worth developing. I think that's a big growth factor for everybody in tech.
So, right, thank you, Jorge. From here, I'll pivot over back to Shannique. Shannique, what has been the most challenging part for you about the corporate world?
Oh man, there's been so many. I don't know which one to pick, but I'll give a few and keep it short and brief. Yeah. I think when I was younger, it was sometimes the women in leadership that would give me the hardest time. Mm-hmm. And you would think that, oh, I'm a woman, you're a woman, and I'm not saying to have any favoritism, right? But just to acknowledge what I bring to the table. Mm. And I think when I spoke to other managers at that time, they were like, we think she's jealous of you because she's going to try to take your job. And I'm like, how am I going to take her job when I'm just an intern? Yeah. I might not want to stay at this company. This is just, me gaining experience before I graduate. Then I had another job where I was being I guess sexually targeted by one of my colleagues, as well as verbally abused by my manager. And when I went back to HR, they were like, "Oh, maybe you're too sensitive." And it wasn't until a white counterpart said the same thing and ended up leaving the company immediately after being on our team for a week, where that they decided to listen and actually remove that manager and put him on a different project where he continued to do the same thing. But since he was part of the old boys club, that he was able to move around, versus if I would have done something like that, I would have gotten fired immediately for the behavior that he did. And then my last thing was I worked very hard on this team. I started from literally the bottom and trained other people, and we're on major, clients, projects. And I was told that I wasn't technical enough, and but I'm writing technical documentation, and I'm training everybody. And then I ended up getting sick. And in the midst of me getting sick to the point that I needed surgery, I had the management team blame it on myself for me getting sick. And I remember our whole team telling the management team, we need more people, because God forbid something happens to one of us, just one, it will change everything. During that time, 2 people got pregnant, and then I got sick. And the manager told me that they couldn't help getting pregnant, but I could help getting sick. And I had like a cyst on my left ovary that was causing extreme pain. And I had to have surgery. It took forever. I was like going back forth to the doctors. And then the female manager told me, well, 4 to 6 weeks is not going to work for us in the team for you to heal after your surgery. So those are just a few, just to gauge how sometimes, we're in tech, but we're not machines.
That's right.
It's also a human experience, and you have to learn how to, like Teresa was saying, navigate and stand your ground at the same token. And also, I tell people, document everything. Any conversation that's being had, whether it's verbal, because then it becomes a he said, she said.
Yep.
And you can't prove, and trust me, in some companies, they go more for the manager because they're harder to replace than someone who's an individual contributor.
That's real. And Shannique, let me just tell you that you got a lot of virtual snaps and yes and the chat group right there. It sounds like a lot of folks are resonating with that, whether it's through personal experience or they've heard about it through their friends. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's what you're speaking to is also a bigger problem that exists in society, where oftentimes women, and in particular women of color, aren't being heard when we're speaking up. And that's not okay, and we shouldn't be pitted against one another. That's absolutely not okay. So thank you for bringing that up. And now I'm going to just hand it off to Luis to go ahead and answer this question as well. Luis, what has been your most challenging part of working in the corporate world?
Yeah, I think for me, it's also the diversity. I mean, being Latino, Asian, being gay as well, having finding like people that look like me, different companies has been challenging. But then also finding courage in myself to speak up, and also like represent or like be the voice, quote unquote, of like many people as well who don't have the opportunity. So I think that as an introvert, that was really challenging at the beginning. Like as a 23-year-old joining Salesforce, trying to like talk about me being undocumented and having the fear of like losing my job, because like what if they don't know what DACA is, or like what if I lose my DACA, like what if I don't get the work permit renew in two years and they're gonna know that I'm undocumented. So just like having that fear I think that has been a challenge, and that's mostly on the diversity side. And then as I'm progressing in my career, finding mentors, that has been really challenging. For entry-level positions, reaching out to someone that has the same job, it's fine. But as you are thinking about becoming a director, if you want to be a manager, or you want to become, I don't know, like a chief of social impact as well at one of those companies, having mentors that know about your story, that know about the struggles that you go through, I think that's really important. And then that has been really challenging for me to find someone at that level that can coach me as well. So those two, and then owning owning your worth as a Latino. Like when I joined any company, like I was really thankful. Like your mom always says, "Oh, be thankful that you have a job." But then when you are inside the company, like knowing that you need to like speak up, knowing that everything that you do has value, and then owning that is really important. So yeah, those three.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yes, I absolutely agree with all of that. I want to start touching a little bit on some of the questions that folks are starting to chime in. I'm going to kick off with the first one that we got in from Catherine Zepeda. Catherine was just really inspired, Teresa, by you and kind of hearing that you came from the nonprofit space before. And I think this is a bigger question for all of you, because I think, and I can share this from personal experience also, being someone that has been a nonprofit for so long, and prior to this worked for a political party, and then before that I was still an undergrad. When I was an undergrad, my impression was like, if I wanted to get into corporate world, I'd either have to have a technical degree, or I'd have to major in business administration. And that was kind of the way that I would get in. But what I'm hearing more and more is that it's not the case. And Teresa, I'll let you start off, because you're the one that kind of helped us get into this question. But how did you get in here? Was it immediate? Were you already, was it just like that was your first job out of school, or that was just your first job? Like, how did you end up where you're at?
Good question, honestly. Ultimately, I had a marketing degree, marketing in Spanish, actually. So I know a lot about Spanish literature that I never use, but I can answer questions on that too. But I started out in marketing. I did a little bit of marketing consulting. Ultimately, I knew I wanted to do something in the nonprofit or social impact space. So I went and I got a master's in social impact and nonprofit management, and went to work at Kiva, worked at Full Circle Fund, but always had an interest in data. And even though I was running programs, helping with community management work, we were always trying to figure out, how can we track stuff? We're using Excel, we're using notepads, we have an event with name tags. Do we count name tags? What does that look like? There were always so many different data related questions that we had. So when I made the transition from Kiva to Full Circle Fund, they handed me Salesforce. They said, here you go. Figure this out. We need to track information. Can you help us figure out what our impact could look like? So I started playing around with it. I got a little bit more comfortable. I had sort of a little bit of an analytics background, which helped, but honestly nothing compared to some of the other people that I work with now. It's kind of embarrassing, but anyway, it was a good start. But from there, we decided we needed a consulting firm to come in. That consulting firm worked with nonprofits specifically. So I sort of followed my passion for nonprofits into the tech space, if that makes sense. So I knew Full Circle Fund needed help. We worked with a consulting firm. I ended up going to work for them shortly after that, because I wanted to learn more about technology. They actually invested a lot in me, and I learned a lot just hands-on the job. I taught myself a lot of things. I went to a lot of seminars, a lot of workshops. Luckily, my company was willing to help me do that, which was helpful. And there's a lot of good community groups as well that I was able to take advantage of for free, which really helped me. And from there, it came down to, I had Salesforce consulting on my LinkedIn. Salesforce was recruiting, and someone reached out to me, and it took a while, but ultimately I fought the good fight, and I interviewed a million times, and ultimately landed a role as a solution engineer. I honestly didn't know what the role was. A solution engineer, I was like, what is that? But here I am.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa. Shannique, what about you? Was your path into the corporate world kind of direct, or did it take a couple of escape routes?
I think it was pretty direct because the way I placed myself, my background's in computer science and engineering technology, my degree, BS degree. And what I made sure before I graduated that I had some internships before I graduated. And I think that's very important because sometimes you have these ideas of what you think a job is until you actually do it.
That's right.
And see what it is you like and what you don't like and what your strengths and weaknesses are. So I was part of National Society of Black Engineers, which is a huge organization that we don't just cater to Black people. It's just in the name. You could be a part of it without being Black or engineer. And I had the opportunity after my first internship to have 2 corporate internships after that. So I started in the National Science Foundation, and through NSB, I got 2 others that were corporate. And from there, my corporate career took off after that. And it just seemed like people just reached out to me. I think the only time I had the hardest time with interviews was actually for Adobe. I had like 12 interviews before I got the job. So what I will say to what you were saying earlier, Amber, is it's not about your degree. It's not about, you know, all these things. I tell people every company needs everyone. And it's all about what you bring to the table, your personality. I remember when I was interviewing for IBM, they were like, your resume is awesome, it's great. And they tossed it to the side. And they were like, we want to know about you. So they want to know about you. They want to know about how you think. They want to know about how you problem solve. Usually that's the key when it comes to anything in tech or anything in any corporate. They want to see how you think, how you communicate with others. They want to see how you take something hard. And sometimes they throw you out there in the wolves and see if you sink or swim. Like when I was at Adobe, it was sink or swim. Is either she gonna take all these customers and, you know, float, or is she gonna sink? And then I've had other opportunities where it's like, here's your training, but then the training doesn't match up with what your job is, or is a lot easier. Or I feel like sometimes companies in their requisitions try to weed people out. So when they see all these lines of things of everything you need to be, let's say, a solution engineer, you're like, I don't have that, I don't have that, I don't have that, so I'm not gonna apply. No, apply and let them tell you no. Because a lot of times you might have it, but be like, look, but I'm willing to learn. I pick up things very quickly. That is going to, like for Adobe, I went through 12 interviews. And that's what I told them, be honest. Be like, I'm like, I don't know this, but I know I can pick it up. I don't know that. I don't know that. So I thought I wasn't going to get the job just because I told them what I didn't know and what I did. So don't let that be a deterrent for being part of different organizations or being part of corporations. Let them tell you no, and put yourself where they are, whether that are career fairs, whether it's virtual, in person. They want to get to know you, and they want to see if you're good. And don't always forget that also, as they're trying to see if you can fit for them, it's also a two-way street. Are they a good fit for you?
That's right. I love that.
I want to add something to what Shannique said. I read this great book, and we incorporated a lot of the principles from this book. It's called The Ideal Team Player. And there's 3 virtues when companies are hiring people. They look for 3 things. And I know Teresa covered a lot of this when she was talking about her experience moving into the tech world. The first is being humble. And humble is not about thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less, right? Which is like, are you humble enough to say you don't know? And then hungry is being curious. It's about learning, right? Like, do you have the hunger to pick up things? Like Shannique said, you don't need to know everything in the rec, but when you're interviewing, can you demonstrate examples of where you picked up some knowledge, where you learned something on your own, and you took that initiative and you have that drive? And then smart is that interpersonal self-awareness, right? How do people perceive you? Are you able to take feedback? I know for a lot of for a lot of teams or a lot of companies that are hiring, they want to see if they can work with you, right? It is a two-way street, but they're feeling you out during the interview. So being humble, hungry, smart are important. It's not about all the hard skills in the job description. It's a lot about the soft skills too. It's about developing those relationships when you're in the role. And then going back to what Luis said, and I've heard this often with young people who are starting out in careers, that they look for mentors, but don't focus on finding the mentor. Focus on finding a sponsor. And a sponsor is someone who has the political capital, who's going to vouch for you, who's going to give your name for that project, who's going to take you along, who has the ability to make promotion recommendations, who has the ability to give you comp adjustments. Mentors are like, anyone can be your mentor, right? And you should have many mentors. And mentor is not all encompassing. It's not someone who knows everything. You're going to have a mentor for like even friends, right? You go to a certain somebody for ideas about food, right? Or you go to a certain somebody about travel, right? Mentor is like a one-way relationship. Sponsor is a big investment, and you should find at least 2 sponsors at your company who have that political capital, who are people of power, who have influence. Get involved in their projects, build your reputation. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of proving on your part. And if they sponsor you, you better be ready to also invest in them and make sure that you're giving as much as you can, right? Because it's a two-way street. So if for those of you that are interested in learning more about sponsors, read this book called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor. And it's a great book because this is how a lot of these corporations work. Not everyone can make those decisions. Not everyone can recommend even, and I'll give you a personal example. For me, as I mentioned, I got tapped to be a leader, and there was change management happening. And my boss, who was a VP, he called me into his office and he said, "Hey, I want you to lead the West Coast." And he became my sponsor. And it's because he comes from that position of power that he's able to make that decision. But then again, like, I was giving something of value to him, right? There was a lot of change management happening, and he needed something from me to be able to do the things that he needed to get done, right? Because leaders, they've got ideas. They've got like a picture that they're trying to put together, and they need people, helpers, to kind of implement that picture. And so based on me, like I'm generally very easy to work with. So he said, okay, so there was going to be a West Coast director and an East Coast director. And this East Coast director was part of a different BU. And then all of a sudden there's this change management. And so he needed someone who could work well with this person. Mm-hmm. And so when you demonstrate those skills through interactions, through meetings, you don't just go up to someone and say, "Hey, can you be my sponsor?" That's very awkward. It just happens organically, right? I think the biggest mistake that people make is when they actually go to people and say, "Hey, can you be my mentor?" That doesn't work that way. Build a relationship, hang out with them, build that trust. What Jorge was saying, that you have to build trust with people, because we're all, animals of trust, right? And if we feel like this person isn't, if they're threatening to us, then, you can feel that out, right? So it's all about building that one-on-one relationships with everybody. And that's how you can navigate yourself. And especially if you want to stay at the company and really grow and move up in your role.
Can I add 2 things real quickly to that?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So the way I got my job at Accenture was I went to the NSBE conference, and I think it was Pittsburgh. And then I went to their hospitality suites. They have tons of hospitality suites at the NSBE conference from different companies for you to network, and 2 days full of career fairs. And I went there and I said, okay, I knew about Accenture years ago, and I said, I checked it out. They invited me to a mixer here in Oakland. They were full of executives and from different parts of the West Coast and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I didn't find out until my interview process from the lead recruiter for all of the West that the reason why they're even interviewing me is because one of the executives was like, get her in here. Do whatever you have to do to get her in here. So just being in the room and being available. So it doesn't always have to be, well, I have to apply to this position. And the same way I got at Apple. I happened to be at the NSBE conference at the career fair. She liked me. They were just, so people were interviewing for 6 months at Apple and waiting and gone through all this. I didn't go through any of that most of those people went through when I got at Apple. They just said, come in, meet these managers, see if you like it, and you're in. So it's all of, and I think also that's very important, like Aliya was saying, if you guys don't know about this, emotional intelligence is so important in your career. There's a lot of emotional intelligence exams out there. Another thing that I found out through helping a school one summer was Johari window, and it's 4 windows, and it's showing about, and I'll type it in the chat. It's so imperative to know emotional intelligence, not just for work, but personal, because if you have a high emotional intelligence, you're able to know yourself well enough to know how to interact with people when it comes to conflict, when it comes to getting things done, and for people to, you know, hear your voice without being forceful, because I've seen it many times where people have been very forceful and getting what they want, but you still want people to respect you at the end of the day. You don't have to like me, but you're going to respect my work and you're going to respect me. And that's how I am across the board. I'm the same person at home as I am at church, as I am at work. It's the same, all the same. I'm not trying to be 3 people to please everybody.
Yeah.
And I just want to add something real quick to what Shannique said, the Johari's window, because I think for a lot of times, even with feedback, right, we tend to run away from feedback. It's uncomfortable. When you get pulled in to a room and you're being told that you're not this or you're not this, your automatic defense is going to go, you're going to be like, I don't want to hear anymore, I'm shutting down, or you're going to want to fight back, right? But it's really important to know to know what the feedback is, so that you know what your blind spots are. And going back to what Johari's window, I mean, I've studied that. It's a great tool. It's not about how you see yourself, it's about how others see you as well. And when you are getting feedback, get specific. Don't go into defense mode. Don't go into like, I'm going to fight this, you're wrong, blah, 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 or start making excuses or completely shut down, right? Like there's different reactions that people have when they're hearing critical feedback. You want to pause and you want to say, oh, thank you for sharing that with me. And I have a question. Can you tell me more about what you mean about what it means to be assertive? I'm too assertive. If that's the feedback, or the feedback is, I'm too quiet. Can you give me an example? Drill down, get really specific, because if you don't get specific, you're not going to know. And that's what's holding you back from your promotion, from those merit adjustments, whatever it is, from that opportunity. And as women, especially, we shy away from that. And I think it's just human nature. Humans don't like to be criticized, right? And generally, I mean, I know I still have a problem with it, but I've taught myself to center myself and just listen. So feedback is a gift. Find ways, find people that you trust where you can get feedback from, so that you know what your blind spots are and that you are willing to hear about it and develop skills on how to become better in whatever the deficiency is.
That's right. Thank you so much, Shannique and Aliya. Those were really great points to sort of add on to this deeper conversation. I'll share a quick anecdote as I transition to our next speaker. For those of you that have either grown up watching Univision or have ever watched Univision in your lives, there's this really, one of my favorite commercials came out, I don't know how long, maybe like 3 years ago. And the little boy goes up, it's a Cheerios commercial, and the little boy goes up to his dad and he's like, Dad, they were making fun of me. Me llamaron bilingüe. And he was like, what? He was like, eres bilingüe, hijo. He's like, you are bilingual, son. And he's like, it's your superpower. Es tu superpoder. And with that, I'll transition over to Luis. Luis, to share a little bit more about your transition to the corporate world, because when we were talking about this earlier, you shared with us that Spanish was sort of your superpower into getting into the corporate world. Isn't that right?
Yes, it was. So as I mentioned before, I went to Berkeley, graduated during that time. DACA wasn't active. So what I did, I was a consultant for many nonprofits around the Bay. About 5 nonprofits. I was doing accounting mostly, accounting and business development, working on specific projects that they wanted to do. But when I got my social in 2013, I believe, um, it was mostly, I always asked my boss for tickets to go to nonprofit events because we used to work with nonprofits. And one of them was the Latino Community Foundation, which is how I got in contact with the person working on social impact at Univision. And I got a tour. I reached out, I asked for a tour, got the tour. And then a couple of months later, there was an opening. And for me, I transitioned into becoming the accountant for the Univision office here in San Francisco, and I was sharing that I wanted to work on Univision because I grew up watching novelas and listening to music. So that was my way of connecting to the community and creating impact with the community that I love. Um, couple, a couple, well, a year later, there were some cuts in the company, and I was one of the first people to get go because I was really new. Um, Luckily, the office was in the same building as the Salesforce building. So I used to take the elevator to go back to the Univision office. So one time I was hanging out with a couple of friends that I knew from Berkeley, and I asked, like, the manager reached out to me, and it was with the Latin America team speaking Spanish, and he's like, "Are you looking for a job?" At that time, I was like, "No." But then when they were cutting jobs at Univision, I started looking for jobs, and one of the things that I knew, like I didn't know about tech, to be honest. Like I didn't know anything about tech. Like this person came from a ranchito in Mexico and then moved here, and then the next thing is like working at the TV because that's what you see. And then I didn't know about tech, but then because of working on the same building, I became more curious about what is it that Salesforce does because Salesforce is everywhere. So I wanted to stay true to my passion about community and impact, and making that transition to the Latin America team and working in sales, and me wanting to become like a CEO for a company or creating my own nonprofit, and reading about all those founders also having jobs in sales. I think that was a good transition and a good story for me to stay true with what I wanted to do with my passion. So same, I had a couple interviews, and then going from accounting to sales, what was the reason? I always tell them that I wanted to I own my own company. I also, when I was growing up and back in Mexico, I grew up in a Chinese restaurant. So I used to sell Buddha keychains when I was a kid. I was like 10 years old. And then I told them that story. And then when I moved here, the way that I pay for my school, I used to work at the Swami, at the free market during the weekends. So I told them that maybe I didn't have like the skills working from another company, but I do this. Like I used to know this. I know how to talk to people. I know how to like ask the questions. And then I study a little bit about the techniques on the sales aspect, like what questions do you have to do. So being prepared and doing that. And that was really helpful. And that helped me getting the job at Salesforce. And how I moved into that org, Salesforce.org, was because I told them that I was really passionate about community. I work with nonprofits. I went through 3 years of like doing sales development, business development. So I was ready to support nonprofits and helping them with their projects. So that was the transition into that org. And I'll say like finding the sponsors and the mentors. I was doing really good at Salesforce, telling my story, and then that gave me a lot of confidence. One of my managers told me that, man, you don't know what's you. He made a comment one time. He's like, you don't know your value yet, but you know a lot of things, and you do a lot of things, and you have a lot of value, and that really pushed me. That feedback really pushed me. And during that time, that's when one of my mentors and a sponsor, I was like, he moved to Twilio, and he reached out to me and asked me to meet for lunch. And he was telling me about that, and I also got an email from Twilio to join their social impact team and start building it. And I was gonna be the employee number 10 at that time. So with that confidence and all the feedback that I got, and knowing that I didn't have anything to lose, I went through the interview process, and I was able to get a 65% increase on my salary and then stocks, and that's how I was able to make the move. But that was honestly, like that took a lot of courage and a lot of like people like telling me that I was able to do it, and also like the feedback from my manager and the confidence that I had at that time because I was doing really good at my current job. So that has been the transition, and I'm really blessed and happy with everything that has.
Awesome. Gracias, Luis.
Yeah.
And Jorge, before we I do want you to answer that question, but I'm going to also use you to transition into the next question as well, so you can answer both of them for us. You know, for those of you that kind of joined a little bit later in the call, I'm the moderator, Amber Gonzales-Vargas, and I work with the Latino Community Foundation. We're a foundation that's based in San Francisco, whose mission it is to unleash the civic and economic power of Latinos in California. So I'm the senior program manager there. But when I started, I was actually the executive assistant to the CEO. We were a team of 5. Now we're a team of 14, sorry. We're a team of 14 now, including some of our interns and fellows, which is for us, it's like we're bursting at the seams. We don't know what to do. There's no space. It's crazy for us. And it's great, but I can't imagine working at a company that has like 50,000 people, that has multiple like campuses and multiple buildings. And I have had the pleasure, because of the work that I do with our Giving Circle network, and the work that we do with a variety of different employee resource groups, to visit a lot of these tech companies. But, you know, I really want to hear from all of you, like how do you stay authentic and true to yourself and your values and your voice in such large companies? And how do you not lose yourself within all of that? I know a couple of you kind of touched a little bit on this as a challenge when you're entering the corporate world, but what is it that you all have learned and also been able to use yourselves to really stay true to yourselves in these companies? So Jorge, you can kick us off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just to quickly touch on the last question. My path today was pretty straightforward. I have a regular computer science engineering degree, and I started with consulting on enterprise resource planning. I kind of laughed a little bit about like definitely do your internships because I was going through my undergrad like thinking that consulting was going to be my jam and that was going to be like it for me, and I went started doing consulting and saw what it was, especially like when you're starting up and the kind of consulting jobs you get when you're at the bottom of the ladder, and that was definitely like an awakening for me. Is like, oh yeah, that's definitely not a career that I want to pursue long term, and I switched to more straightforward software engineering. But that's kind of like my path there, also through interviews, making sure you connect with people, all of that. I think everybody else already touched on it quite a bit, so not much to add there. But definitely one of the things, switching to working in a larger organization, and I think like back to the original point of like one of the challenges being that you kind of end up representing your group because there's not enough diversity and you're the only one in the room that represents, you know, you're particular. For me, sometimes I'm the one who represents the Latino culture, or I'm originally from Mexico, and not many. There's not that much representation on tech for Latino folks, unfortunately. But yeah, sometimes you end up feeling like that. But when you get to work in a larger company, you also get the benefit of something like employee resource groups, where there's still like low diversity, but there are other folks like you that you get to band together and start forming a group, and you get to share your particular challenges with folks who may have been facing the similar situation. Maybe they're further along in their path and they can help you navigate a little bit the current challenge that you're facing. You know, informal mentors or formal mentors for people who have been able to grow in that company. They can become your sponsor because they understand where you're coming from. They understand how difficult it is sometimes to be heard. So there's definitely that silver lining when you get to join a larger organization, that there may be folks who are similar to your background, who may be further along the path, that can help you. And if nothing else, they can listen to you, and you may not be as alone as otherwise in a smaller team where you're the only one who represents your background.
Okay, awesome. Gracias, Jorge. And Shannique, I saw you nodding your head there a little fiercely in the beginning. So for you, how have you been able to stay true and authentic in these companies and in your journey?
I know everyone has different spiritual backgrounds or beliefs, or might not believe, might be an atheist or a I forgot the other word where agnostic. There we go. For me, I'm a Christian, and that's you know, my foundation. And for me, you know, I did have problems early in my career when I first got out of college, having confidence in myself. It was to the point my client would come to me and like, Shannique, you know what you're doing. Like, have more, you know, confidence in yourself and what you're doing. And I think the reason why is because I had so many male voices in my head, and, you know, so used to, I remember in school, the guys not wanting to work with me because they didn't think, you know, we're in our computer labs that, oh, she doesn't know anything. And it's crazy how in school that same thing happens in the work field, where they don't think you're that you're technical enough or you're on their level until they see what you can do and how you deliver. So you always have to, as a woman, as well as a woman of color, have to double prove yourself, like Aliya was saying, that I belong to be here. And sometimes you have to be a little firm, like Teresa said, where I've had clients that didn't want to work with me, but when they went to my boss to say what was wrong with, you know, Shannique, they didn't have anything to say. So I'm like, okay, it could be the fact that I'm a woman. It could be the fact that I'm a Black woman and there's not many of us in the field, because you mostly see a lot of Caucasians and you see a lot of Asians. You don't see a, you know, a Black woman in tech. It's like a Black unicorn. You don't hardly see a Black unicorn. And I know I keep bringing up unicorns, but you know, that's how rare it is. And then it's funny, I was just having a talk with someone at my church, and she was like, I didn't know that you were in tech. I said, I know. A lot of people don't assume that I'm in tech because of my personality and how I carry myself. But yeah, I'm in tech. And I don't look like everyone else in tech. And I think that, and you know, companies are now talking about diversity and wanting more diversity. But I think the problem is in corporate is they want to get the numbers, but they don't focus on how to keep those people to stay there. That is the biggest challenge. And you have to be true to yourself at all costs and understand if something is not working for you or you feel uncomfortable, there's a reason. You need to reflect on that, and you need to make the changes that are best for you, whether that's leaving the company, whether that's going to a different business group, whether that's going a whole different career path. That you cannot be fearless and being true to yourself. Because if you, I think about it this way, you spend more time at work than you do with your family, with your friends, with your own self. Why be fake to yourself to please people that don't care? Why? So be honest with yourself when things are not right, and speak up, but you have to have a finesse when you speak up so that it's not emotional, because when they feel like you're emotional, especially as a woman, then they can't take you seriously. So you have to take the emotion out of it just a little bit and say what needs to be said in a way that's constructive, but also gives a solution, because they don't want to hear no one complaining without a solution.
Awesome.
I second that, Shannique. And I have a story to share, and I think this can be a real life example for everybody in terms of my own experience and what happened. So as y'all know, I'm a Muslim, I'm a practicing Muslim, and I don't drink alcohol. And a lot of times when you're doing these team building events, a lot of them take place after hours. And I think especially for women, it's important to set boundaries, right? And I think no matter whoever you are, it's important to be aware of your boundaries. It's important to know when to walk away, especially if it's getting too late at night. And so in this example, there is some change management, and I had a direct report who was not happy that I was his manager. He wasn't happy that I was a woman. He wasn't happy that I was a colored woman. And then he wasn't happy because, you know, I was a practicing Muslim. And that night he said to me, he said, he had several drinks, and it was one of those late night conversations. And he said to me, I don't understand which religion doesn't allow you to drink. How come your religion doesn't allow you to drink? I don't trust people who don't drink. And it was like, when he said that to me, I was just shocked. You know, you have that moment where you're like, huh?
Yeah.
And I had that moment where I was completely surprised. And he said something else to me too, which was great because I felt like it was a gift of feedback. And he said something about my credibility as a leader. He felt like I repeated myself too often, and he didn't believe that I had an MBA. And so in that interaction, I said to him, I said, you know what, Jay, it's late tonight. I'm going to my room. I'll see you tomorrow. And I didn't make a big deal about it. You know, I just kind of walked away, and I was livid. I was mad, and I was really rocked to my core because I have never been told this before. And this is like my direct report telling me this. So I remember going back to my room. Sometimes it's good to just walk away. You have to be ready to speak up. You have to be in the right frame of mind. And I'm so glad that you said this, Shannique, because I could have spoken up and I say, what are you talking about? You know, the HR person was right there. But I chose not to because I felt like it wasn't the right time. And a lot of times when you do go to your manager or your boss, they're going to ask you, so what is your solution? How are you going to solve it? Right? And I knew what the solution was going to be. I mean, it's like, come on, it's just a late night event, you know, be a big girl about it. Right? I knew that that was going to be the situation. So I walked away, and the next morning I saw him and he looked at me and he's like, we good, right? I'm like, yeah, we're good. And so, yes, I could have said more in that interaction, but again, you have to be in the right frame of mind to say things, and things worked out. He decided not to be a manager anymore. He moved into an individual contributor role, which is great because I didn't have to deal with it anymore. But being able to know the right moment and time of when to speak up, knowing your boundaries, you know, being strong. Yes, if I wanted to be a follower, I could have held a drink in my hand and I could have been like, yeah, I'm going to party with you guys, right? But that's not who I am. That's not my values. So building that strength in yourself to know your values, being okay with who you are, being okay with calling it a night at 10 o'clock, even though everyone else is going to hang out all night and bar hop. If that's not you, go to your room and you will be fine. And build those relationships with those influential people in other ways, right? Because everyone's going to be drunk anyway. Yeah, it's going to be bonding, but you're not going to get a lot of value out of it. What you want to do is you want to build those one-on-one relationships and find other opportunities to do that. So my advice to especially the ladies who are listening, have your boundaries, don't get sucked in, be true to who you are, know what your values are. Don't compromise your values. It's just a job. At the end of the day, it's just a job. And for me, I'm a spiritual person, just like Shannique. I believe in God. I know that God will take care of me, and I rely on my faith. And I know that there will be other opportunities. I don't tie my wealth and my self-value to this job or to this person.
Awesome. Thank you all.
And I had one quick thing to say. I had the same things happen to me about drinking. I'm a social drinker, so I don't drink very often, but I would always get the, oh, you're not going to drink with us? And I'm like, oh, I want to see what it is for you to be drunk. And I was very honest with them. I'm a boring drunk. I'm not fun to drink around. I'm just going to want to go to sleep. So I don't drink on the client side because clients could be anywhere. And not only that, I don't need to drink to have a good time. I already act like I'm drunk all the time because that's my person. That's what I was told as an intern. Shannique, we get drunk to get to where you are every day. So I'm drunk on life. So I don't need to drink to show who I really am.
Thank you, Shannique. Luis, you want to add on?
Yeah, I think for me on the value side, knowing your value and what you're offering to the company, I think that's really helpful. Like in my case, like I know that I'm good at connecting with people, but then I'm also real with what's going on with the community. And then like, I acknowledge and I'm aware of the privilege that I have at this time. So like knowing that diversity doesn't mean inclusion, and then equality is not the same as equity, like, and explaining that to people and your managers, and sometimes like telling them that that's what it is, and then giving value to the work of that ERGs are doing. And I think that's really, that has been a challenge, but that has helped me out as well on staying at the companies where I am. And also that we have this experience, similar to the everything that we have done, we are prepared to like join any company and add value and create things that, and creating the spaces. Like many of us, we are the first people to go to college. We are the first people, like sometimes we go into a room and we are the only ones, the only Latinos, the only Asians, the only gays. So we are used to creating that space. So like ERGs is mostly that, creating the space for you to like find that, like what is it that you need that you're not getting from the company. So like, I think that has been really helpful. And just adding to that, knowing that once you're in the company, you have two tasks. One is like recruiting more people as well, but then also maintaining what you like the talent that is inside the company.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to notice. And I think ERGs have a lot of value in this, any company, in any tech company. So join your ERG. That's my
I can have
advice.
one quick thing to add to that. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm adding. I feel like it's important to, yes, be a part of ERGs that you connect with, but expand your horizons. I've learned so much at my current company, as well as when I worked at Adobe, and especially when I worked at Adobe, to go to the Asian network, go to the Hispanic network, because then you learn so much about the same struggles that you guys have together, and you can work together. And I went to one where Cisco was there at Adobe, and they were talking about how Asians, like Aliya says, doesn't speak up as much because of the culture, and why there's a glass ceiling when it comes to management for a lot of Asians because they don't speak up. And I never had that. It was an aha moment for me going to that Asian network event with the Cisco panel. So go to different ERGs that have nothing to do with your background or nothing to do with, where you feel like you're comfortable. Stretch yourself a little, and you'll learn a lot by being part of other ERGs.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And I think for me, I went from a 5-person company to a 50,000 person company. I was lost for the first year, and I started getting involved by going to, we have a Latino force at Salesforce, we have Outforce, and I went as an ally to those groups, and it was amazing. Like, I learned so much, I expanded my network, and I'm continuing to kind of step outside of my comfort zone and get involved in groups that I am an ally to or I don't know anything about. Outside of ones that tie to me, right? Like Women in Solution Engineering or the Women's Network, which is great, but there's only a certain amount of perspective that you can get from those groups. And being able to be uncomfortable and also still be yourself is a hard thing to do. And the one thing that I love that Shannique said earlier was having, like, you have one self. You don't have to be a different person at home. You don't have to be a different person at work or with your friends. That took me a while to figure out. And honestly, I'm still figuring it out, but I think I've gotten to a point where I keep my head on my shoulders by just realizing, hey, we're all humans. I'm going into a meeting. Yes, I might be one woman out of 50 people on the line and I'm presenting, but I can crack a joke. I can still be myself. I can be sarcastic. I can just be comfortable. And it opens up the conversation, and it helps me connect with people that I maybe wouldn't have normally connected with.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. And, I want to go back to something that Luis sort of mentioned earlier that really made me pause. Luis, you said diversity doesn't necessarily mean inclusion. And also, so I would love if we can just talk a little bit more about what does that actually mean at your companies? What do ERGs look like at your companies? And do you feel like your companies are doing enough right now?
Yeah, I have worked for 2 tech companies, Salesforce and right now with Twilio. The thing that I always mention during the meetings is that we always focus on, we want to have 40% diversity or like people of color joining the company, but it doesn't, like, that's diversity in numbers, but that doesn't mean that we are creating like an inclusive culture in the company, like respecting women, respecting other cultures, respecting that like Cinco de Mayo, for example, like you're not supposed to be making fun of it. It's not about drinking or like sombreros. So like that's the inclusion that it's missing sometimes, and that's what I believe a lot of the work that we have to do internally. We don't have to, but at this point, like we are the first people in our company, so it's we do. We don't have to, but we want to. I want to. I want to make that change. So because of that, I want to create an inclusive culture in my company, and I always speak up to leaders and C-levels that that's something that we need to focus on, because we're gonna be losing so much talent, and we're not gonna be able to retain them. So
that's great. Thank you so much. And I do want to hear from the other folks, but I have to put on my LCF hat just for 1 second, because for me, it's bizarre, right? We're talking with folks here from the Tequeria community, right? We're living in the state of California. And for those of you that weren't aware, 54% of school-age children in the state of California are Latinos. 10 years from now, that is your future workforce. Now, if these young people and their families aren't being supported today, and they don't have a way or a pathway to pursue higher education or exposure to technical roles or exposure to potentially get a job in one of the fastest growing, highest paying industries, that is a problem for every single Californian. So the fact when I'm still hearing that the numbers of tech companies are still 3 to 5% Latino and Black, that is ridiculous. That is a disservice to everybody in this state and everybody in this nation. So thank you all so much. I just want to highlight all of you for one, being such powerful representatives for yourselves, and also for leading in your own companies. And I will now go back to the question around diversity does not mean inclusion. So how do we start to remedy that? Like, what does that look like in your companies today? I'm going to just go. Who wants to go next? I'm going to pick somebody this time. Jorge, go ahead.
Yeah, I that definitely resonates a lot with me on diversity doesn't mean inclusion. And I think that one thing that I found particularly striking is that at Yelp we've actually expanded to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And belonging is a very, very strong word for me, because it means a lot to me. One of the things that I'm particularly proud of how we operate and the kind of culture that we've created is that there is kind of like the value is called playing well with others, but like there's a particular emphasis on making sure that people can operate and be their true selves at work and don't have to hide what they think or who they are to fit in with the culture. It's not easy. It doesn't always work. It's not 100% effective, but it's something that we strive for. And there's a number of initiatives there. We've already talked a bunch about ERGs, but there's also a continuous improvement process where folks can suggest ways that we improve our process to be more inclusive. Sometimes that means, for example, now with parents, especially in the situation that they have to take care of their children at home, there's specific efforts that we're taking to make sure that it's considered that you don't get the same 8 hours or 12 or however much you're working now, because you have to pay attention to something else happening in your life. Similarly for new moms and new dads, there's specific leaves and benefits and all of that, and specific programs to get them back to work later on. And there's all of these other processes, like people with different abilities, like being able to include people who are deaf or who have some other limitations in their work. That means a lot for now in the environment that we are being able to work distributed remotely, asynchronously. There's specific things that we do in our work to make sure that the communication doesn't break down because we're not sitting next to each other, or because we're not in the same office. All of these little pieces, when they're put together, they create an environment where people can start to be more of who they are, and they can work within that system. It's not only about like doing big speeches and touting diversity. It's about the day-to-day work and how we focus on, like, for this task, for this person that we have, how are we actually and making sure that people with different situations are able to participate, are able to do their best work. So you have to look at it in that granularity. It's not a big spreadsheet with numbers, it's about the day-to-day work and how you bring it together.
Awesome, gracias, Jorge. Aliya or Shannique, you want to add on to anything?
I would say at Accenture, they are big, the biggest company I've ever seen when it comes to employee resource groups. For those who didn't know what ERG was, I saw that question. We have interfaith, which also includes agnostic, atheist, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, you name it. Military, parents, women, LGBTQ. I feel like I'm missing, like, there's at least 10 ERGs or more. It's massive. We have the African American, we have the Hispanic, we have the Asian. What else? I feel like there's like 2 or 3 more that I'm forgetting. So we have the most ERGs I think I've ever seen at any company, which is great. But looking at ERGs overall of all the companies that I've worked for, a lot of times they have these ERGs, but if you don't have corporate sponsorship and money coming in to facilitate all these different, fireside chats, events, celebrations, and now then you just have an ERG just to say it's an ERG, just to say that you care about diversity. Now, what I've seen when it comes to inclusion is whether you're on the client side or whether you're internally at the company that you work for, there's still times where people are just like, be quiet, you don't know what you're talking about. You just got here. I remember on one of my projects where the manager was like, why you didn't speak up? I said, I spoke up via in person, via email. I don't know, should I put it on a billboard? That the data is a hot mess. And I've had times where I was being screamed at by upper management. It wasn't until, and I was quiet, and that's the whole thing what Aliya was saying about knowing when to speak. So I'm the type of person, I'm gonna let you act a fool, and then I'm gonna speak when it's time. So, and sometimes I don't even have to speak. Somebody speaks for me. Another manager is like, hold up, wait a minute. Why are you screaming at her? This is how we've been doing it before she got here. And she's just trying to make sense and trying to tell you why it's like that. So sometimes it takes other people to speak up for you. Sometimes you have to speak up for yourself. And know that at the end of the day, no one's gonna make you feel included, that you have to, it starts with you. You can't change people on how they think or react, but you can change your mindset and how you project yourself for people to want to include you and want to respect you. And it's funny, after that, there were so many managers that came to me and said, we heard what happened. You handle it so well. I don't know if I could have taken someone screaming at me like that, because I'm a woman, and these were 2 men that, they've been, doing SAP and Salesforce and all these things for years, and I'm just picking this up and learning, and I'm seeing that everything is combined when I'm telling them it's not right, and they don't want to hear it. So it's inclusion is so many layers to it, and it has to start from you, and it also has to start from the company making it important from the top down. And until that happens, and they make that a true priority and not just a buzzword or just a way to get people to think that you're about diversity and inclusion, then I feel like we have a long way to go before we get there.
Yeah.
And people need to understand we need different perspectives from different backgrounds, different races, different ethnicities, different sexual orientations.
Right.
We need all those different perspectives, because that's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we get better. Because I might be thinking one way, that other person might be thinking another way, and somehow we collaborate and make things transformative and create something amazing. But we can't get there if we still have people with ideologies that they have to feel that they're always better than someone else. No one's better than anybody. We both got to put on our pants the same way. We all pay taxes, whether you're homeless or not, because even homeless people, when they buy things, they have to pay taxes on it. And we all got to die.
Preach.
Nobody is better than anybody else.
Preach,
And until people
preach.
get that through their thick skulls, we will always have this problem, whether it's in corporate or outside corporate.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely. I 100% agree with you, Shannique. And I think D&I is really misunderstood. Unless you have diversity of opinions in the meeting room, unless you create a safe space for people to speak up, and not have this hive mentality, you're not going to get to, by having just different looking people in the room, that doesn't achieve just diversity and inclusion. It's about being able to speak up and creating those safe spaces. So I feel like this is still an area we have to grow in. And I mean, I think even leaders, right? Like, they weren't born leaders. We're all humans. We all make mistakes. We don't come with the playbook. It's a lot of trial and error. And unless you have a leadership team, unless you have people who are self-aware, have the emotional intelligence, are willing to invest in their own growth, they won't get there, right? And I mean, we're tribal people. We want people like us to be a part of our tribe. And and it's hard, you know? So I think it takes a lot of development. I mean, that's why there's executive coaches, there's education. Your education doesn't stop with going to school. It doesn't stop with graduating from college. We are in a different world right now. We have to constantly up our game. We are constantly learning. We should be learning something, improving ourselves, whether it's public speaking. Being in a company is all about using your voice to influence others, right? You have to figure out a way how you can influence others. And for me, I mean, one piece of advice that I can leave with everyone who's in this audience: learn to tell your story, learn to be able to speak in a meeting, learn to be able to chime in. Even if you have nothing to say, chime in, make your voice heard. Right. You know, summarize what someone just said, right? Say something, be heard. And you're being watched. You know, people are always watching you, and you have to figure out a way on how you can make your presence elevated. But if you struggle with that, do Toastmasters, do all, there's so much out there in terms of helping you with your public speaking. I think people are so afraid of public speaking, engineers especially. They are afraid to like go into a meeting and give a presentation. And if you can't give a presentation, then that's going to hurt your career as well. So if there's one piece of advice, focus on your communication skills, learn to be able to influence in a way that's authentic so that you can get your ideas heard, and don't shy away. Don't shy away.
Thank you so much, Aliya. That's a great way and a great tip to end this formal part of our panel presentation. I'll cheer for the audience. I'll cheer on behalf of the audience. Woo! Thank you to all of our panelists so much. We're going to transition over now to all of the questions that you are all submitting. This is a great time to start incorporating the advice that Aliya just gave you all. Just ask a question. Doesn't have to be perfect. Raise your hand here in our little question box and make sure that you are able to reach out to all of our panelists here. Now is the time to ask some of these burning questions that you all might be having. And I am going to also, I'm just going to go kind of in order from what these questions are. Some of them are directed to some folks specifically. So if it's directed to you specifically to the panelists, if you maybe want to type in that answer, that would be great. So the first question comes from Izar Buendia. Can you be a leader as a follower? They say that they aspire to be a leader, started a business, lead workshops, etc. But sometimes they feel that they're better suited as a follower. So can you be a leader as a follower?
I would say that you don't have to have a title to be a leader. And not only that, I think people forget, if you ever read any of John Maxwell's books, or Max Lucado's books, they're really good on like leadership. And I think what people need to realize is a leader is a servant, not a leader is a person that's telling people what to do. And once you get that in your head, that you are a servant to people, then you look at leadership totally different. When you look at, oh, I got all these people listening to me, and, you know, hey, I want, you know, people to listen to me and control people and tell them what to do and, you know, pass work off to them. It's not about that. The true heart of a leader is someone who serves. So if you have a servant's heart and you care about people, whether it's building them up, helping them to get on their career path, or, you know, seeing the company grow, or if you're passionate about social things, whatever it is that your passion is, you can be a leader in it because it's part of who you are.
That's right. Do one or two of you want to add on to that? And if not, it's okay. We can go ahead to the next question. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Shannique. All right, up next is another question. This one comes from Oscar Gonzalez-Vargas. And this goes back to our conversation around documenting these verbal conversations. How do you go about documenting verbal conversations?
That was a question for me because I stated that. See, this is what I do. I am like the CIA in a way that I have a folder, first of all, for every email that I feel in my spirit that I know is going to come back when it comes to my work, so I know what I've done. And also, when you have verbal conversations, all you're doing is regurgitating, and I know that sounds horrible, but is regurgitating the information that was stated in that verbal conversation via email, just to make sure you understood everything clearly from that conversation, so that they can confirm or say, yes, some of that is what I said, but this is what I meant when I said X, Y, Z. Now, if it's a conversation that you know that they don't want to verbally, you know, they won't respond to the email. That's happened too. And you have to be careful with everything you send out via email because you can't take it back. So be very targeted, but like I say, take out the emotion. This is what I do when I deal with airlines. I'm also a travel agent or a travel consultant. This is what happens when I deal with airlines, hotels, and how I get them to give me what I want. I like to place people in my shoes, because when you tell people your problems or your issues at that time, they don't care, they don't understand, they're still getting paid. But when you're like, okay, if this was to happen to you, what would you want? And that's how I deal with the travel side. Now, when it deals with corporate, I'm like, well, this was stated on this day, and this is and this was the email. And let me tell you, when I transfer from one, give you an example, from one business group to another, my management team didn't want me to leave. And by the time they found out higher management, I've already hired, got someone hired from Univision that wanted my job, passed over all my clients to everyone. And I had the email receipt that my new manager said what my new start date was, when I would start training. And I had that in my little folder. So when it came to going to HR, there was no he said, she said, right there, black and white. So, you know, heads were rolling. And I was able to transfer to the new team. So it's very important to have that. And I remember one manager used to say, "Ooh, Shannique, you keep everything." Yes, I do, for people just like you. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. Because you never know when you need to pull it up. And it's about saving your behind, honestly. Because when it's a he said, she said, then it's almost like you're back in the schoolyard in the sandbox and saying, well, he said this and she said that. Nope. When you have it in black and white, it's almost like court. Exhibit A, Exhibit B.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Shannique. And somebody wrote in the comments, and I agree, it's something you can show them the receipts. Just show them the receipts. Make sure that you keep them for as long as you can.
Yep, I stay keeping my receipts, and sometimes I email it to myself just in case they do anything to the email server.
Blind copy, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And I think this applies to any industry, not just tech. So if you're not in tech, this just applies. It's a good method. It's a good practice for you all to have. I know we have a mix of folks that are probably watching us right now. Maybe some of you haven't even started working yet, but this is such a good practice to have, to just make sure that, especially for those really important conversations, that you are documenting everything and keeping a copy for yourselves. Up next, we have a question. I think, Aliya, you sort of answered this one a little bit kind of during your last tip, but are there any resources, workshops, or seminars that could be suggested in regards to how to communicate in the corporate world?
Yes, so there's Toastmasters, but another one that has been really helpful to me is Magnetic Speaking. It's based out of San Francisco, but they also do virtual classes. The key with public speaking and communication is to keep practicing. The more you do it, the better you'll be. So find opportunities to do that presentation, even if it scares you. You're scaring yourself more than really the whole fear. I mean, for me, like I remember when I used to go up in front of a group, I used to sweat profusely and I used to get super nervous. My face would get hot. And I realized that I had to keep working on, and it's still uncomfortable, but it's changing that fear into more excitement, right? It's like getting on a roller coaster. Roller coasters, yeah, they're scary, but then there's also thrill factor. So it's a lot of work that you have to do with your mindset to kind of change that vocabulary that's in your head of like, I'm not a good speaker, or everyone thinks I'm boring. Oh, that person is checking their phone, they're checked out. Oh, this person isn't, crossing their arms, they think they're mad at me, or this person's kind of not even looking at me, they don't agree with what I say. So it's really training yourself to ignore all those cues from body language and really focusing on yourself. So a lot of it is working on your own psychology. And a lot of it is keep practicing. The more you do it, the better you'll be. Magnetic Speaking is a great resource. Toastmasters is another one. Improv is amazing. Do improv. I did BATS in San Francisco. It was a 6-week improv workshop. And improv is all about playing games and being in the moment, because a lot of the speaking that we do is not planned, right? We get put in places where we have to come up with a quick response. And you can't plan what you're going to say. The problem with Toastmasters is that a lot of times it's these speeches that you write out and you deliver. Life doesn't work that way. So improv is a great resource. I would highly recommend it. And hey, if you do improv, if you go to these improv classes, maybe you can start an improv group at your company. And that's what I did, because I noticed a lot of people at my company struggle with public speaking. They struggle with delivering presentations. So I started an improv group, and we meet every 3 weeks. And we get together, we play games, we network. This is a great way to get out of your silo and meet other people, right? You're kind of building your brand, you're learning about what's going on in different areas of the business, and you get to have fun and you're improving a skill. So when you learn something, find a way of how you can teach it. And that really adds your value. That increases your value at a company as well. So improv, Magnetic Speaking, all of them, do everything. If this is your mission, I'm telling you, it's super, super important, especially if you are an immigrant. I mean, I'm Pakistani, so being a woman, having my voice amplified, I really had to learn to do that. And by doing these classes, it's going to help you tremendously.
2 things to add to that, SHIP, which is dealing with Hispanics and engineering type fields, as well as NetSuite, and there's other organizations where they have huge career fairs. Like there could be like almost 300 companies there, and you're going to all these different booths and they have interviews on site. Going to one of those will change your entire life, like, because you're going to so many booths, you're speaking to so many people that you will just go into one of those alone. You would get over like half your fear of speaking, because they're right in your face, you're right in their face, you're in a line waiting for speaking to these people, and just be yourself. If you're being yourself and not overthinking, which I know sometimes is harder to do than, harder to do than I'm saying. But when you go to that, it pushes you off the edge. And you go to those big conferences. They even have the National Hispanic, I think also MBA Association, all these big associations. Be a part of them and go to their big conventions. Those will push you off to the deep end, and you will get rid of your fear like with one swoop.
Awesome. Luis?
Yeah, I think that really helped me to me as well. I was really involved with organizations, Alpha, going to events. Tequeria, it's a good one. You get to know so many people, diverse as well. There is a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, I believe. I can look it up and send it to you guys. But I took that training as well. That was really helpful. And then for me, what was really helpful, it was gaining confidence in myself. The 4 agreements, like about who you are, that was really good. The power of now, that was really good. Like that also helps you in how do you communicate with people and how you communicate with your manager. So I highly recommend also like doing a little work on you, and then with everything else on how to communicate externally. I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, one thing to add on that too, there's a book that I really like. I think it's something on the principles of Kaizen. I can look it up, but it's basically like taking one small step to accomplish something huge. A lot of times I get overwhelmed with things. And so that book is a tiny little book, and I'll look it up and share it with you. But it's basically saying do one thing. You can do one thing today. Do one more thing tomorrow. And for me, that was literally signing up to go to a networking event in San Francisco, which I hate doing. I can't tell you that I like it now, but I do it, right? It makes me uncomfortable. I took the first step. Now I'm with all of you guys speaking on a panel. Obviously that's years later, but it's just one little step that kind of gets you out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's actually a great transition to our next question from Maria Jose Rios, which is, what are some of the ways that you navigate fear in areas that you know will help you grow?
I can jump in there. For me, it's literally just jumping in. If I'm afraid of something, I go straight at it. And that comes from years of kind of sitting back and waiting for the right moment and realizing that there's never a right moment, and also asking for help. So if you have a fear, if you're afraid of doing something, maybe you have that sponsor, maybe you have some sort of a friend or mentor on your side that you can turn to, but not being afraid to say, I don't know, and asking for help, and also just diving right in and asking questions.
Awesome.
Thank you. Something to add to that? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, kind of tying the previous question and this, I think that one of the things that really helps in improving in these areas is whenever you can lower the stakes. That's one thing that I like about Toastmaster and all these places where you get to do your presentation without people judging you as if you were in the boardroom. And similarly, if you don't have access to those resources, just like present to your friends, and then like they're going to be less judgmental that doing in real life. But that's for all areas where you have fear. Like if you can find creative ways to lower the stakes, so you're not dealing with the big thing at first. Deal with the smaller things, like do the small steps, like figure out what is that small step, but also lower the stakes so you don't have to dive right into the scariest part. See if you can find the one that's just a little bit scary and start there, and then practice that, do that for your practice, and then at some point jump into the big one.
That's right.
Fear, remember, is false evidence appearing real. So it's not real. It's just in your mind and it's crippling you. And if you have a fear about something, that's an opportunity for growth. And you're not alone. Some people feel the same way, but until you share that and really try to get it head on, it'll always cripple you. It wasn't until I think there was 2 instances I'll give real quickly. One, when I was in a room full of women, it was an executive shadow program that I helped support, that we helped women be able to shadow executives at Adobe from all different parts. And one of the executives was like, okay, can someone, you know, answer this question or whatever? No one put their hand up. Because I put my hand up, she was like, I want to mentor you. So sometimes, because you face any fears or you step out, you get blessed in different ways. And when you don't step out, you end up hindering yourself. And whatever fear you have or whatever things you're going through is not just for you, it's for you to help somebody else, because you'll meet someone else down the line that might have that same fear. And you might be able to use your story or what you've been through to help them navigate that too. And I'm trying to think another fear. I remember telling my manager that I wanted to do this innovation workshop. And he was like, Shannique, you're not going to have the time. And I was like, Shannique, you're new at the company. You don't want to get fired, but you want to take a chance. And you know you care about innovation and you like entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship and all these other things. And this is like the first time the company's ever do it. And if he gets mad at you, deal with it later. Do you know, months down the line, I end up being at some all hands, I'm on the video screen, and they're interviewing me about doing this project that my manager didn't want me to do. And they was like, ooh, Shannique, kudos. And these are the same people that was like, no, you're not gonna have time. You can't do it. You're this, that, and the third. But I stepped out on faith and I did it, and then look what happens. So sometimes you have to do it.
Awesome. Thanks. And I'm actually going to jump around on the questions for a bit. From Rachel McCoy, we have a question that says, when getting interviewed by a company, what should we ask to figure out what their diversity and culture looks like?
I think I can get started there. Sorry. One thing is, it's been mentioned a number of times here already, but ask about their employee resource group, right? Their ERGs. Like, what are they doing about that? Ask them about like, where is the company participating in other like more open places? Like, are they participating in these events that are like these conferences that are specifically for diversity groups and all of that? And you can also ask them like, how specifically, like, how do you represent diversity and inclusion in the values that you hold as a company? How do you represent that in the day-to-day? I think that asking directly is good. You say, hey, like, what are the specific efforts that you take for diversity and inclusion, and focus on the inclusion part, as we were talking before. But yeah, besides asking directly for their efforts, ask for the ERGs, ask for their values and how they represent it in their work.
Awesome.
Also,
go ahead. If you can sit down with somebody during the interview, so you interview with the interview team, and part of our interview process when we're hiring for our client support team, we pair up the candidate with a support team member, and it's an opportunity for the candidate to ask the team member, candid questions, right? Like, what is your culture like? Because it's more of a safer space. So if you can ask to meet with somebody on the team, like, hey, I'm really interested in learning more about the team. Can I talk to one of your senior resources? Mm-hmm. That's a great way for you to learn about the culture. And when you go in, really pay attention. It starts in the receptionist area, right? You get a sense of what the company is all about. If the receptionist, if that lobby area, something is off, it extends all the way in. So really pay attention, because they're not only interviewing them, but you are also interviewing them, because you're going to spend 10 hours out of your day in this office. And if, it's not about just getting that job, ultimately you're going to have to work for your manager, right? And if there's anything like weird about your manager, if you feel like, wow, this person seems very micro, or they, it just seems there's something off, like, you know, pay attention to your gut feeling. And if anything feels off, then really think about it, right? And look at the environment, look at how people are working, are people laughing? Are people, is it an open environment? Are people like stuck in their cubicles? Are there dogs? We have dogs in our office, so people really get impressed by that because of dog-friendly company. Just pay attention to all, it all starts from, you know, how you're welcome in the receptionist area all the way to walking into that room with the interview team, but then find out if you can talk to employees, because that's your opportunity, or do some digging on your own and go through LinkedIn and find people who work at the company, or if you know someone who knows somebody, you know, there's ways that you can get introduced, because you have to do your homework too.
Awesome. Luis?
Yeah, I was gonna follow up on that, interviewing them as well. Attend some of the events. So all these companies, they also have the ERGs, but then these ERGs, they host events, or with the Queria, like the people that attend, like who are these people? Like ask them questions. I think that's like an easy one that you can always do. And then doing the interviews, something that I did at Twilio, that's the first time that I did it, and it worked. But they always talk about like bring your entire self to work. So during my last interview, like after I went through like 4 of them, I brought one of my undocumented shirts that it says undocumented and unafraid. And when the chief of social impact, she was the last interview. She was the last person that was gonna interview me. And when she told, like, when they ask you, like, who are you? That's one of the first questions that they ask you.
Yeah.
Like, I told the story. And then I was literally waiting to see her reaction because I was going to be working with her. So I wanted to know what was the culture in that team. And then if they really wanted me to be my true self. So that's something that I did. It's like an interview. It's 2 ways. You're going to be in that company for a couple of years. So it was really important for me to know that. And yeah, so maybe take risks after you went through a couple of interviews with people and see how they are. But it's a 2 way. So interview them as well.
Yeah.
I have something to add to that. Every company, when you come in, they're going to be like, yes, we are the best company. We do this, we do that. I think it's very important, like Aliya was saying, doing your research. And when I say research, I'm not just talking about Fortune. I'm not just talking about, you know, just LinkedIn. But there's another one, Glassdoor, where you get a more comprehensive, and, you know, read it and filter out things, because some people are just disgruntled. But if you see a common theme, then you know that something's up. Other things is you want to ask questions that they don't always get, and to get to the answers and be strategic in it. Like, what happened to the last person that was in this role? Or I hear that you guys lay off every November from some of the research. Like, ask questions. I mean, take risks, but be honest, because you're the one who researched this, and you're not trying to get laid off when you just started. And that's the whole thing. You have to be real, and you have to ask those pointed questions that they really weren't ready for, those curveballs, because then it's not going to be those blanketed statements that they always give, because every company is going to say they're the best company for you to work at because we do this, we do that, we're great. So
thank you, Shannique. And now I know we're kind of nearing time for our formal question time, so I'm going to merge 2 questions together, and hopefully you all can answer it in less than around a minute. So the question is going to be, if you could give your younger self some advice, what would it be? And do you have any tips for upcoming college grads that are kind of also navigating these uncertain times where they're not going to be, you know, in person? Probably a lot of their interviews are going to be virtual. Are y'all hiring? Let the people know. Aliya, you want to start first?
Sure. So what was the first question?
Tip for your younger self.
Tip for your younger self: don't be afraid. Do not be afraid, and get out of your head. you're not that important. Second is, I know a lot of people want to work for Facebook. A lot of people want to work for these sexy companies like Yelp. Just kidding, Jorge. There are other companies, right? There are other companies. Find a company. A lot of times I go to career fairs all the time and I recruit for our client support team. It's a great role. It's one of those roles where you don't have to have a technical background. You get trained through our training program and you are in a technical support role. And I notice that everyone's flocking to like the AI table or the AI company, and like Snowflake has got 100 people at their table. But don't, keep your options open. And your first job is not going to be your perfect job. It's going to be a job. You want to get the experience. You get your second job. You find your way. Don't limit yourself to like these big, sexy companies. Find a smaller company. Find a company. I didn't even know what Advent was. I found someone I had applied for at Advent, and I was going to blow it off until I was coming back from Vegas, and I sat next to a woman and we started talking, and I asked her, where do you work? She said, Advent. I'm like, oh, I was supposed to interview with them, but I think I'm going to blow it off. She's like, no, you can't blow it off. It's an amazing company, right? So don't limit yourself. Keep your horizons open. Look for different roles. Don't just say like, oh, I want to be a product manager. Product manager is like such a buzzword. There's so many things with customer success. It's not only about CSM, right? Everyone wants to be a CSM, but CSM is just one aspect. There's other roles in customer service, right? There's technical support, there are customer support. Broaden your horizon. Just don't get attached to this one title, and just talk to as many people as you can. This is a great way to do informational interviews. Learn about the role, because a lot of times people have this idea, they're just going by their idea, but when you actually talk to people, you get the full story.
Awesome. Thanks, Aliya. I'm going to go to Jorge next.
Yes. So first advice to my younger self. I think that one of the things that I found most useful, and I would tell, like, I should have started doing that a lot sooner, was finding my way to network. I think that there was mentioned that Aliya mentioning it, but sometimes like you see like, oh, people only network through like drinking and these after hours events, and that's how people do it. Like, no, find your way. For me, it's like I like one-on-one coffee time with people. That's how I connect. That's how I find. So I say I sometimes like move away from the big groups and then figure out times when I can have coffee with folks and then just talk about regular things. But that's how I find my way. And sometimes there's a little bit of fear that we're talking about, like, oh, like, but I don't really like, meeting strangers and all that. But it's getting that part and finding your way to network, for me, has opened so many doors and opened my perspective to things like opportunities I didn't think that were available. All through meeting folks and finding my way of doing it has been super helpful. So that's on the front. And for finding the role and kind of figuring out how to get into the industry. I think there's been a lot of good tips that are worth repeating. Figuring out how to interview folks when you're interviewing them, like figuring out easy ways to get access to a lot of companies. Career fairs, I mentioned a lot of times. I think that's a great suggestion. That definitely figure out how to get through a lot of interviews early on, so you know what to ask for, and like how people ask things. Like the first time that you go into a job, the first time you go into an interview, you don't know what you're doing. So go get that first experience out of the way, and build on top of that. And if you have ways of doing getting that learning quickly, it's going to help you a ton. So in that form, career fairs are great, that you get to talk with so many folks from different backgrounds and get all these questions in your head. So maybe the first time it's not super successful, but you get all this experience, and then when you're interviewing with your dream company or with all these things that you're pursuing, you'll be a lot better prepared.
Awesome. Thank you, Jorge. Teresa, you want to go next?
Sure. So advice from my younger self would be to speak up sooner and more and often, ask questions. Don't kind of sit back and just be. Somebody once made a comment about being a selfish or a greedy listener, which is something that kind of put it into perspective for me. Like, share things that you need to share too, but also take in information, and kind of it's a give and take. So I would have embraced that a lot sooner. And then also embracing failure and turning failure into an opportunity, and not being afraid to fail, and not taking risks because I thought I was going to fail, where failure was actually what I needed to do to get where I am today. And then I think Aliya mentioned something about taking nervousness or and turning it into excitement, which is something that I've been able to embrace with public speaking, with presenting, with all of the things that make me nervous. It's just, I get to do this. I should be excited. Let's channel that into a positive feeling, which is honestly been great and really helpful for me. And then just a comment on the looking for a job and things like that. If one thing that kind of has helped me later in my career is thinking about the company. So we talked a lot about culture. I think there's the culture of a company, and then there's the culture of the team within the company. So look at those two things. And then also don't be afraid to take a role that isn't sexy or whatever you want to call it if you like the company, right? Maybe it's a great company, it's a great fit. You can network and grow within that company and have a great career and start as something that you never thought that you would even dream of want to be doing, for example.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa. Shannique?
I would say to my younger self, never this is so hard because it's never compromise who I am just because I'm scared to lose my job or of how people perceive me, because I hate that word perception, but in corporate they use it a whole lot to try to put you down. Mm-hmm. And just being true to myself. Like Teresa said, be okay with failure, because that's sometimes how you learn, because I'm a type A personality where everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be right. And if it's not, then I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to cry in the corner because I messed up. Yeah. But sometimes, you end up having a scarlet letter on you as a woman. But if a man messes up, oh, it was just a little flub. But also knowing that every job is a stepping stone to get to you where you are supposed to be. And even if you start out, let's say you really like a company, but you not too crazy about the job, know that it can change, but know that the politics of each company is different. Mm-hmm. So it might be harder to change jobs, and understanding the politics. And if you don't understand what politics means, is every company has their own thing of how you navigate your career, how you navigate the company, and it's all different. And they're like unwritten, unspoken rules that are there. I think understanding the politics of the company that you work for is very important. And remember that every company needs everyone. So let them tell you no. And you continue to be tenacious with what you believe and go forward. As far as college, I would say try to have your GPA as high as possible. If not, make sure you have a great story of the work that you're doing that's maybe, or things that you're doing that maybe hinder your GPA from being the best. But know that after that, no one really cares about GPA after your first job. Because a lot of times people stress, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get a good job because my GPA is not a 3.5 or 4.0. Do not worry about that. Just make sure if it's not, that you have a good reason, but try to keep your GPA at 3.0 and above. And also do a lot of internships before you leave, because the first thing they want to tell you is, you don't have enough experience, so we're not going to hire you. And it's like, how am I you to hire me if I don't have any experience? Someone has to give me a chance. And then also, sometimes you will hear and know that it's not you, that, oh, you're overqualified. Don't you want someone who's overqualified that they can bring more to the table. So when you hear that, you'll hear that a lot, that you're overqualified or you're too expensive because we don't want to pay you what you want because you have a master's or you have a lot of experience, then you know that's not the role for you. And I feel like when something is meant for you, it's never forced. Think about it when you think of interviewing and getting jobs like dating. Think of, if, you try to figure it out, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. When something's meant for you, everything just opens up. And when it's not, it closes. Think about your closest friendships, your husband or wife or your girlfriend or your best friend. You didn't have to force it. It just happened naturally. Sometimes you have to just let it happen naturally and not stress yourself over something. If it's meant for you, it's meant for you, no matter what.
That's right. Thanks, Shannique. Luis?
Yeah, out of college as well, invest on having a great, on knowing your story and knowing who you are. I think that's a good one. And then ask questions. Once you are in your job, sometimes bring your own chair into the meeting. I think that's something that I heard a lot from people that I look up to. So many times you're gonna be the first one in your company. So bring your own chair to like some of the meetings to learn more about what's going on, listen to what's happening. Yeah, create those opportunities. And then once you're, something that I'm learning right now as I'm working with a lot of people and managing people, also investing on the leader that you are in your ways of being. So I'm a powerful, loving and honest leader, and knowing the purpose that you have in your work. So like my purpose, like I've been working on this, that my purpose is to create safe spaces and create opportunities for other people, for others. So like I'm getting this in my current job because I work in social impact. Tech allows me to communicate with many and have like an impact global. And I work with social enterprises. So like knowing my purpose and being in love with my purpose more than just a company and the job. So if everything that I do is with a purpose, so that brings me joy into my life, and I'm sticking into that. So yeah, that's what I'm learning right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I want to just quickly once again thank all of the panelists. I know we weren't able to answer all of the questions on the Q&A. So if some of the panelists would like to stay until 8:30 to help answer some of those questions, you're more than free to. You're also more than free to hang out. Just thank you to all of you so much for being real. I think a lot of the time, in my experience, I'll tread carefully. In my experience, a lot of the time, folks are very cautious about like what they say in these conversations. They're like, I have to check in with my communications team. And I really appreciate all of you for speaking candidly, for really giving so much great advice to all of our audience. I would be a horrible moderator if I didn't ask for us to take a quick picture. So if you would just smile for me on the count of 3, I'm gonna take a screenshot of our beautiful faces. So Yoselin, thank you. If we can also get Alan and Maria, that would be great. If you're too shy, it's okay. But I'm gonna take the picture on the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, perfect. Mil gracias. I'll make sure that you all get the photo after this. Thank you so much. Yoselin, maybe you can help answer this question. Somebody did ask, they really love what our panelists said and they wanna share the recording with their friends. How can they do that?
Yes, we're gonna be sharing the recording of this video on our social media at Techeria. There is also some links in there that I will be sharing again, the events link and the become a member link as well. And since we have the audience in mute, I know that if they were able to comment, you guys will be hearing something like this. And this is because you guys deserve it. This was amazing. Yes, you guys, yeah. Feel free to keep answering the questions live or by text. The participants feel free to keep answering, asking questions, networking with yourself, share more literature. It has been amazing. I want to thank every one of the participants for being here until this time, and especially Amber for moderating this wonderful event. It was supposed to be presential, but we made the best out of this situation and we still did it. I want to thank Aliya for being here. Such a wonderful story, many years of experience, and she's still leading and empowering other people, especially women around the San Francisco area and the world, let me tell you. Jorge, oh my gosh, thank you very much for sharing your wonderful journey with us. Luis Liang, an inspirational story. You don't have to feel, you only have to think about Luis and his story when you feel down and you think, yes, I can do it. I can do it. Shannique, you're amazing. You're such a powerful story.
Yeah.
We all learned so much from you. Everybody was like, yes, Shannique, yes, thank you for the advice and the insight. And Teresa, come on, Teresa. She came from nonprofit. She made it all the way until corporate, and she's still driving her career and learning and sharing that in powerful story with us. So thank you very much. Again, claps to you. Claps, claps, claps. Oh, yeah, it's done. Clap, clap, clap to here.
Awesome. Thank you. And don't forget, folks, to connect with us. So we are also like the amazing tech support team here. Yoselin, Alan, and Maria were extremely supportive, and they were typing in and they were responding to some of your questions there as well. So shout out to the three of you also for supporting. And of course, don't forget, connect on LinkedIn. This is really the way. Don't be fearless. Reach out. I think one of the things that I've learned in my career is that there's so many people that are willing to lift as we rise, and so don't be afraid to reach out. It's so worth it. I can share that's actually how I got my job, was through a cold email that I made through LinkedIn. So these are the risks that we have to take, and may everybody continue to be well and be healthy. Thank you again to our panelists. For those of you that have to drop off and head out, I know it's already 8:15, so if you have to, please go ahead. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It's been such a joy getting to know and meet all of you.
Yes, definitely. If you guys want to head out, let me know. But if you feel answering the questions, I'm going to stay here until 8:30.
Awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It was amazing. Thank you.
Luis, there is a question for you. Have you been able to find the have you been able to find those mentors at that level that you help you propel? If so, how?
See, well, really quick for the people who are here, I've been posting a couple of jobs from Twilio, so feel free to reach out. There's a couple for people who want to get into tech, the engineering. There's a program that we offer. It's not entry level, but there's a training. It's 6 months. So if you guys are interested, feel free to send me your resume and I can refer you. For mentors, I think Aliya mentioned a good thing. Like, you don't ask mentors to be your mentors. I think for me, the key aspect is to like show up to events, being active in my company. Ask them for coffee. That's a good one. Like introducing yourself. Say hi when you see them on the elevator or around the office. And also like being honest, telling them your story. If like in my case, like I'm really involved with social impact at a tech company, like at companies. So like just telling about who I am and at the impact that we have on my work with nonprofits and how passionate I am on that. I think that's who I am, and it's been honest, and people notice that. So they always had me in mind. So I'll say one of the people that I work with was at Salesforce, Tony Profit. He's the chief equality officer, and then he gave me his cell phone number because I share about my DACA status, and then he put me in contact with some attorneys as well. So like there's a lot of like mentorship that you can get and people and networking, but being who you are, I think that's the number one thing, and reach out.
Thank you. Mackenzie Schneider asked, what is an underrated leadership trait that you wish had more recognition? And if possible, do you have an example of someone in your life who embodies it?
I have one answer for that. One trait that I admire a lot from people who have managed me and who have helped me in my career is being able to ask good questions. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of times people think, you have to have great ideas, but in all honesty, you need to have good questions, and then other people will get the ideas to you. But being able to specifically drill down into real issues, it was mentioned before in the panel, but not only asking the generic question, but actually like getting into specifics and be able to figure out, like, sometimes people tell you what you want to hear or the story that they want to put forward, and whenever you are able to discern little nuances there and ask something that they miss saying, or it may be an omission, it may be something that they're not necessarily wanting to share, but that usually gets you to the problem. And somebody saying like, oh, everything is great, and they leave something out. If you ask about that, you may find out that not everything is going amazing, and that's something that if you have people reporting to you, it's very important to know how to ask about that. And if you are in any kind of leadership position, that's super useful to do.
I had, I think I answered it in the chat, but I'll talk about it in more detail. I had a manager at Apple. His name was Hans. And I think the trait that a lot of managers don't have today, and I don't know if I'll ever have a consulting company of my own later on, especially when it comes to management, because I think it's so imperative at every company, big and small, is if you have a good management team, you're going to have good clients that are going to come back to you all the time, and you're going to have people that are going to want to stay and work for you, and they're going to respect you, and they're going to go above and beyond for you. And I think the two traits that I think that are missing in a lot of management teams are, some of them do not understand the business inside and out like they should. So they'll come up with these ideas and have no idea how it will be executed at the lower level. And then I think there's management that don't have emotional intelligence to know how to deal with people. So you either get one that knows one really well and doesn't know the other, and vice versa. And when that happens, then you have a lot of disgruntled employees. And I actually had a manager at Apple that he just knew how to navigate those things so seamlessly, to the point other managers were jealous of him. Like, why does everyone like you? Do you give them like money? Do you give them candy? What do you do that, and you help them get to where they want to go? That's what managers are supposed to do. You're not supposed to retain your talent because you're scared you're going to lose them, and how you're going to replace them is about, it's almost like a mother bird preparing the baby chicks to fly. That's what a manager does, and creates other managers. And I think, people are so busy trying to protect themselves that they don't do that. And he was that type of person that he wanted to know where you wanted to go. He wanted to know what you wanted to do and help you get there. And then he treated people like people, not like a machine.
Okay. I want to add listening. Listening is so important. I feel like a lot of times we do a lot of talking and we don't listen. And even when you're in a conversation, a lot of times people are not really listening. They're just waiting to respond. And the best leaders that I've seen are the ones who are good listeners. And that's where the emotional intelligence comes in.
Yeah, I'm still working on that, Aliya.
Just one thing you guys made me think of is the best manager that I ever had invested in me when I was failing. So she told me, hey, you're not meeting your goals, and I know you can do it. Here's the raise that you would have gotten if you were going to be successful, and go ahead and do this. It's also your warning, so get your act together. But it was honest, it was open. She invested in me when I wasn't investing in myself, and it empowered me, which honestly has stuck with me today.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. I'm going to go over to the next question from Carla Roman, who said, what is some advice for people just starting their tech career in regards to having to consistently prove ourselves, especially as an underrepresented woman? So advice to folks that are just starting their tech career in regards to having to constantly prove ourselves, especially underrepresented women.
Shannique, I noticed that you have something to say. I have something to say too. I'll let you go first.
I just feel as though this has been my whole life. To be honest, from college all the way through, it's about proving myself. But you have to get to the point where you're comfortable in your own skin. And you know that I learned this from my one of my jobs, my first jobs out of college, that, and I know this is about to get spiritual, but it is what it is. I work unto my job as I would unto God, and that God will bless me based on that, versus me trying to please people that will never be pleased. And as long as I'm doing that, then I can go to bed at night and I can sleep well, knowing that I put my best out there, whether it was good enough for that person or not. That's what it is. Because I can go through, I could be a circus act and do all the tricks, and they still won't be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, at the end of the day, I have to be comfortable in my own skin and knowing that I did my best job that I possibly could. And if that's not good enough for them to receive it, guess what? That's not the right business group. And I think people need to realize there's a difference between working for a company that could be a good company and working for a business group and working for a manager. So know that you have options. You can change to a different business group, you can change to a different manager, or you can leave the company. But at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable in your own skin and knowing that you did your best and that you can't please people. Even if you do everything they say right and the way they want, if that person does not like you, because there's a lot of times where people just don't like you. They don't even know you. They don't like you. But you have to be comfortable within yourself, knowing that you did the best job you could.
I also want to add here is that oftentimes I know that there's a thirst and a hunger to move up in your career. And sometimes it's too soon, right? Like you start a job, it's 6 months, you're 6 months in and you want that next promotion, or you want a title change. There is, I mean, if you've proven yourself and, you know, if it's been a year where you've proved yourself and it's time for the performance conversation, you should always be meeting with your manager. If you feel like you're not being recognized for the work that you do, how many times are you meeting with your manager? Do you have a monthly one-on-one or a weekly one-on-one?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the cadence in. Are you talking about your goals? Are you talking about your accomplishments? Make sure you have that conversation about the things that you've worked on. Make sure your manager knows about them, because managers are busy. They've got so many other things. They're putting out fires. But make sure that even if your manager misses the one-on-one with you, it's on you to reschedule it, because they're not going to do it. It's on you to reschedule it. Have that conversation. Talk about the goals. Hey, you know, I noticed that this is what's needed for the promotion. This is the next title. What do I need to do to get there, right? And don't be clear about what it is that you need to do. Remind them every time you meet, like, hey, you know, if one of your goals is public speaking, oh, hey, you know, I took this class on presentation skills. I've joined this group. Oh, and I delivered this presentation. Or one of your goals is mentoring that new person that joined the team. Make sure you're in your manager's ear, because ultimately they're going to make that decision whether you get promoted or not, right? And so it's on you to remind them, to have that conversation, to meet with them regularly. And then also just being realistic. If you just started this role and it's 3 months in or 4 months in, you got to build your reputation, right? And you got to get good at what you're hired for. In the beginning, when people are hired, I mean, there's a period where you're proving yourself, and you have to give that time. But at the same time, you also want to keep having that dialogue with them so that they're aware. You're clear about your goals. They're clear about the progress that you're making on your goals. And when it comes to review time, there are no surprises. You know, you come in and say, these are the things that I worked on. This is a project. This is what I've accomplished. Okay, you know, have that conversation. Don't be shy. But you want to give that time too. It's not going to happen like 3 months after you're hired, because a lot of times I do notice that people get really impatient. They want to go boom, boom, boom. It doesn't work that way. You have to prove yourself. There is a period, but also have that conversation, make sure that you guys are both in alignment and they know what you're doing. And what Shannique said, if your manager isn't recognizing, then it's time for you to move into another role. It's time for you to go somewhere else, right? I think a lot of times, especially for those of you that are looking to get into new careers, it's not only about the company, right? I mean, ultimately for me, like this is what I've learned, it's your boss. If you don't get along with your boss, it's hard, right? It's really hard because they are going to be responsible for all those decisions, whether it's vocal merit increase, promotion, etc. And so being, knowing the person that you're going to work for, and then the people that you work with. If you don't like your coworkers, if you hate your team, that's going to be hard too. So getting along with your team. And I have seen situations where people don't get along with each other, and it creates a lot of unnecessary drama in the team. So getting along with your team. And then last is like the work. Do you like the work? And let's be honest, work, sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's hella boring, and sometimes it's a drag, right? So there are going to be good days and there are going to be bad days. We are not all doing these passionate work, right? We're not like following our passion. Yes, I mean, some of the work is going to be interesting and fun, but there are going to be days where it's not going to be interesting and fun. But ultimately, like for me, what I've realized in my career is that I have to be comfortable with who I work for. And if my manager gives me autonomy, I thrive. If my manager is a micromanager, I fail. And I become, I don't do well in those situations. So know exactly what you want. It kind of goes back to knowing your priorities, what's important to you. It's not always about money, right? If you're making tons of money and if you have a horrible boss that's always breathing down your neck, that's not fun either. Or you've got coworkers who are awful, like no one's got your back, that's not fun either. So it's really understanding what your, what your values are and where you thrive, and really knowing yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ali. And I think with that, we are pretty much at time now. Yoselin is clapping for you all. Thank you again for joining us. We love you all so much. And have a beautiful day. And don't forget to connect with us on LinkedIn, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate it so much.
Gracias. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aliya.
Thank you.
Tu primer evento.